You're listening to Life Unrehearsed with Matt DelVecchio and Stephanie Erickson, tackling the topics that life throws in your way. Brought to you by Severia Mobility Products, providing you better mobility for life. Call them at 1-800-931-5655.
Well, good afternoon as we enter the second half of a long weekend. You're listening to Life Unrehearsed. Thanks for joining us. This is a show all about the ins and outs of family life. All families have their challenges. It could be about yourselves. It could be about your elderly parents or even the kids. We'll tackle these topics and try to navigate you through it all. My name is Matt DelVecchio. I specialize in retirement home searches and senior transition support. And here with me is Stephanie Erickson, social worker and family caregiving expert. And if you want to find out a little bit more about us, please join us on our Life Unrehearsed Facebook page. We have all previous shows, lots of information there, and we thank you for all your comments on the Facebook page. Stephanie, how are you doing?
I'm doing great. And first off, I'd like to say happy birthday to my son who turned 9 today, although he's not even listening, but I promised him I would say it no matter what.
Happy birthday. All right. This is a long weekend.
Yeah.
And so a lot of yard work is being done. So quick little story here, Stephanie. So at my household, I usually have the grass duty and the dandelions. And
that's right.
And you know what? I actually love doing it. It's the Italian in me, I guess. You know, it's therapeutic. And my wife, who is also called Stephanie, she's got plant duty. So she does all the plants. So did the grass yesterday. It was looking really good. You know, this time of year, everything's green. Then we're finished. I go out. I get a phone call from Stephanie, and she says, "Why did you throw my ferns in the garbage?" And I said, "What are you talking about?" You know. And so I come home. I'm sure she's saying I'm crazy. I'm saying she's crazy. And sure enough, she shows me these ferns in the garbage, and I say, "Oh, you mean those big weeds that I just pulled out?" She goes, "You know the ferns that we bought together last week at the garden sale?"
So she planted them, and then you took them out.
I yanked them out. They look like big, ugly weeds to me.
Oh, my God.
Okay, so, for all the husbands and guys out there, okay, do a double check before you start yanking out those apparent weeds that are actually ferns. Just a real quick comment. We had a great show last week. Sophie Gregoire Trudeau, and the second half was Claire Webster talking about Alzheimer's and her struggles with her mom. Just a quick note. There is the Walk for Alzheimer's Montreal 2017 taking place next Sunday at 10 a.m., run by the Alzheimer's Society. So if you want to check it out, check out the Walk for Alzheimer's Montreal 2017 website for a great cause. And speaking of that, we have April Hayward from the Alzheimer's Society coming to join us on June 4th in studio, as a matter of fact.
Yeah, she's great. I know her very well and done a lot of work for the Alzheimer's Society. They're great. And definitely go out there and support that walk. And as we're kind of getting on the topic, I want to jump in to make sure that we have time for our guest. But before I introduce him, I'm going to already kind of pose a question in some ways. Medication is something that lots of people take at all ages. I'm fortunate enough to not have to really take any medication except for the odd headache here and there. But certainly as people get older, more and more medication starts to be taken. I know that within my own family, my mom, my grandma, my stepfather, I could name a lot of others, medication keeps being added on, and then they're going to the pharmacy and saying, "Oh, there's this natural supplement, I read about it here," and all of a sudden they're taking 15 pills a day. And it concerns me because I wonder about interactions and stuff. So we're going to get to these topics today. So happy to have in studio a colleague of mine, actually. Matt just met him today for the first time, but I know Maciek. We've got a pharmacist in studio, Maciek Zarzycki.
That's correct.
Zarzycki. Sorry, I'm not saying it right. Practiced before we went live. Still having trouble saying it. Welcome to the show, Maciek. Glad to have you here.
Glad to be here.
So people know what a pharmacist does. I don't think that's an odd job. It's pretty well known. But for you and the way that you practice as a pharmacist, how do you really see your role in helping do you call them patients or do you call them clients or?
We call them patients.
Okay. And so how do you see your role in helping your patients?
Well, it's really about making sure that everyone receives the right treatment. And the right treatment is not always only medication. So whenever we receive new prescription, we check to be sure that it's the right one for the condition, it's the right one for the patient, and also that it's fine with all the other treatment that the patient is already receiving. And we're trying to kind of keep it clean in all that mess that it's becoming polypharmacy as people get older.
Polypharmacy. Can you explain what that is, polypharmacy?
Well, polypharmacy, that means when people are taking a lot of different medication,
Okay.
when they see many different doctors, specialists, and when 2 or 3 medication become 12 or 15. So
Yeah.
that's when we start talking about polypharmacy.
Okay.
This is Life Unrehearsed. I'm Matt DelVecchio with Stephanie Erickson. We're here with Magic, a pharmacist that's going to help us navigate through a lot of questions about medication overload. And Magic, you know what? We're going to open up the lines right away, so hopefully we'll get a couple of callers. So please feel free to call in if you have some questions. And how have you managed for you or your loved one medication overload? And you can call us at 514-790-0800 or text us at 514-800. Now, Magic, I was at the pharmacy the other day, and I was amazed with the wealth of knowledge that the pharmacist had. And how can we decipher between what information we should get from our pharmacist and versus what we can get from the doctor? Because in listening to this pharmacist, I was like talking to a doctor. So what's the difference?
Well, first of all, I would say you should always get a second opinion. So why not ask the pharmacist for that second opinion? And one thing that people are not doing enough, in my opinion, is go see the pharmacist before going to their annual checkup to the doctor. If you're taking many medication, and by many I mean even like 3 or 4 chronic medication, before you go to a doctor, maybe just go see your pharmacist and ask him, is there anything that should be changed in my therapy, in my medication? Should I ask any specific question to my doctor? Should I challenge him to do a few tests or a few things, or maybe to remove or decrease some medication? And that's one thing that we can do and that people very often do not take advantage of enough, in my opinion.
It's a very good point, because I think the general public would be almost a little fearful. I'm going behind my doctor's words, but that's an excellent suggestion.
Yeah, I wouldn't have even actually thought about that. I mean, I would advise people, write down your questions for the doctor ahead of time, but it's true, because if you go to your pharmacist and you kind of have all that medication in front of you, or maybe supplements, and you give your feedback, your observations, perceptions, opinion, whatever it might be, and then you share that with the physician. So, but what about this? People have a lot of physicians, and sometimes people go to different pharmacies. So how does the right hand know what the left hand's doing, and how does that impact how people are taking their medication, and if it's effective, or maybe even against I don't know how to say this, but I guess I'm losing my word, Matt. You can't help me out here.
You're on your own.
Not counterintuitive, but when drug interactions, that they're interacting with each other in a negative sense. Woo, there it is.
Well, first thing first, obviously, especially if people are starting to see many different doctors, many different specialists, please try to keep it simple and stick to one pharmacy. That would be already one big step forward to just simplify the life of everyone. But I totally understand people that are, just like in their 30s or 40s, and they take a medication once in a while, and then they go to the pharmacy that is the closest to their house or the closest from the clinic, and they do not take any chronic medication, and they end up having a few different pharmacies. It's not the best practice, but it's not that dangerous. We can deal with that. But as soon as you start having a chronic treatment, then you should really try to stick to the same pharmacy to keep things simple, so we can catch all those interactions. Since a few years, there is what we call the Dossier Santé Québec, where we can, I would say most of the time, see what people are taking in any pharmacy.
Oh, wow.
But I would say most of the time, because it's not always working properly. Sometimes things are not uploaded to the DSQ, and it also takes a little bit of time to log into that.
Okay.
So it's still always a better practice to always go to the same pharmacy.
But you're making a good distinction about chronic conditions versus just the odd, I have some medication and anti-inflammatory because I injured myself. So people should keep in mind chronic conditions. A lot of people who are taking medication are getting older in age, and lots of the concerns adult children tell me is about compliance, administration, memory loss, and some challenges that are getting in the way for people in taking their medication as prescribed. And I want to get to that, but first we're going to hear about what's going on the roads, and we're going to head over to the CJAD Traffic Center.
This is Life Unrehearsed with Matt DelVecchio and Stephanie Erickson. Brought to you by Severia Mobility Products, providing you better mobility for life. Call them at 1-800-931-5655.
What a drag it is getting old. Kids
Oh, always nice to start off with some Rolling Stones, huh? I always think of my dad every time I hear that group. That was my dad's favorite group. I'm Stephanie Erickson, social worker, family caregiving expert, here with Matt DelVecchio, retirement home search and senior transition specialist. And you're listening to Life Unrehearsed on CJ 8800. In studio, we have with us Mariel Zarzycki, and he just said his name with a nice twist. Say it.
Zarzycki.
Okay, forget it. Not doing
That's
it.
the Polish
I
twist.
can't even
Pass
get it.
on that one.
Yeah, I'll pass on that. And he's a pharmacist, and we're talking about medication overload. And we do have some texts coming in. We will get to them, but I want to get back to the question, Mariel, that I asked you before we heard from the traffic center. A lot of times people are having trouble taking medication. Sometimes it's because it's too much and their life is getting in the way, but often it's due to some cognitive losses. I know for my families that I work with, that's an issue for them. What are some of those challenges as people get over in terms of compliance? Like, what kinds of things do you run into as a pharmacist?
Oh boy, we just have like maybe 10 minutes left, but no, there's many challenges that are present. I mean, of course, when there's an overload of medication and people end up taking 12 or 15 medication a day, 3, 4, 5 times a day, we have what we know, what most people know, like the disc pills or the dosettes or even the pouches that we can organize medication. But it's not only that. I mean, lack of compliance can take many forms. Sometimes it's just because people don't understand their treatment and they don't understand why they need to take it. They don't feel sick anymore for some reason, for example, with high blood pressure or high cholesterol, and they just stop taking them.
They're not making the connection that they feel better because they're taking the medication, you mean?
Exactly.
Okay.
Or some condition just don't have any clear symptoms, like high blood pressure is very often called the silent killer. So people need to understand exactly why they're taking their pills, and very often they're not. That's one thing that may help with compliance. And when we're getting into also people that are getting older, they're having trouble with what we call dysphagia. That means that they have trouble swallowing. So we also try to work with changing sometimes the form of the medication to go more liquid, or to see if some medication can be taken like sublingual. That means that they will dissolve in their mouth.
Oh.
So there's many things that we can do, but there's so many examples that I could give you that, but every case is
Of course.
is different.
Well, Magic, I had a very similar example. We were helping a family find a retirement home, and as I was finding out the details, the mom was at the hospital, and she fell. What was originally supposed to be a slip and a fall actually was not a slip and a fall. The daughter went to her home and found that she just simply wasn't taking her meds. She missed 2 days straight, and as it turns out, she lost her balance. She got lightheaded and she fell. And so that put the daughter in a very difficult position. They had to have a conversation with mom. Are you allowed to bring other family members into the equation to solve a situation like that? Do you have the power to do so? Because obviously it was a risk here.
Yeah. That's a complex question, because to give you the simple answer is no. If a child doesn't have
like the mandate
exactly,
homologated, yeah.
Exactly,
Yeah.
a mandate. No, we cannot give information, personal information, unless we feel that there's a real risk for the patient. When someone is not taking their medication for 2 days, like in your example, it very easily goes under the radar. We don't catch it. If someone doesn't take his medication for a week or a month, then we can catch it more easily. But just 2 days, it's very hard. Mm-hmm. But usually it happens very slowly, and time after time we see people that are missing a few days there and there, and then when we feel that there's a risk for the patient, then yes, we can contact the family, but it's not always so easy. We always have to document those things.
You're listening to Life Unrehearsed. I'm Stephanie Erickson in studio with Matt DelVecchio, and we also have our guest today, Mariel, who is a pharmacist. I'm ignoring his last name because I can barely say it. Zarzycki, as I think is.
That's perfect.
Okay, I'm pronouncing correctly. Having a hard time there. If you have a question for Mariel, particularly if you've had any experiences with medication overload, make sure to give us a call, 514-790-0800, or you can text us at 514-800. I want to get to a text. Someone wrote in and they were talking about a very specific situation for them. And I know, Mariel, I'm assuming you can't give this person advice. They're not in front of you. You're not looking at all of their list of medication. But I just want to bring up a small point. They're saying that the medication says to take it once a day, but there's not a day specified. Does this happen often where there's instructions that are given? I guess it's in the prescription, the way the physician writes it out, and the person comes to you and they don't know exactly when they're supposed to take it? I mean, what do you do?
Usually we try to be as specific as possible, but for some medication, for example, antidepressant, it really depends. Because some antidepressant may cause drowsiness, some antidepressant may wake you up, and sometimes it's the same antidepressant that can do both, depending on the patient. So hopefully, I hope that if a pharmacist just say once a day and doesn't specify the time of the day, he explained to the patient exactly what he has to do and how he should react if he has any side effects or any reaction to the medication. But usually we try to be as specific as possible.
Great. We actually have a call in here. We have Mike calling from Lachine who has a question about generic drugs. Mike, are you there?
Yes.
Hey, Mike. Thanks for calling in.
Hi, Mike.
Hi.
I have a question. My doctor prescribed no generic drugs. My pharmacist says it doesn't exist anymore, that medication. You have to have many generic drugs. And even they didn't even tell me that this is generic. So what can be done about that?
Well, do you have the name of the medication?
Yeah, it's phosphate Novartis.
Okay. Well, Novartis is
Well, there is two other companies who make the same drug, and they all discontinued it to the same time.
Okay, so this is a question about like generic and original. So you probably get these questions a lot. I know my husband works for pharma, and he always tells me never go generic. But I don't know what you would say to that.
but I think that the drug that you're referring to, I think the phosphate, it's backordered in pretty much every single source lately. So that's a challenging one because I think that now they have to work with some other equivalent. There's no even generic available, but it's not discontinued. It just backorder, if I'm not mistaken, for that particular medication. So they usually have to compound it like either in a liquid form or something like that for your specific case.
Thanks, Mike, for the call. And just speaking of that, I know there's a lot of questions, particularly with insurance and companies insisting on generic drugs versus brands. Are you seeing a switch? Is it a massive switch or just a small switch going to generics from national brands?
I would say that most of the time, when a generic is available, people are taking the generic because their insurance company is pushing for it, and just because it's way cheaper and it's as good. I mean, it's just as good. There's really, as a pharmacist point of view, I would say there's no reason to stay on a brand name when there's a generic drug available. So.
Oh, my husband is cringing right now hearing this. Now, this is something that I do, Magic, and maybe you're going to tell me I shouldn't be doing this. I Google a lot to get my medical information, right? I bet you have. I know, very dangerous. You probably have that a lot, huh? People coming in and saying, oh, I looked up this medication and it says that I could have a heart attack, I could this, I could that. How do you kind of calm people's nerves when they're Googling at home and come in with the answer of how something's supposed to work?
Well, first of all, I don't have any problems with people Googling their question about their health or their medication. I mean, that means that they're involved in their health, which is actually a good thing. What I just hope is that after people Google that and get some answers, that after that they confirm what they found out with a healthcare professional, either the doctor or the pharmacist, because you can find pretty much anything in the internet. And even if you go on serious website, even if you go like something like PubMed, you can find studies that show one thing and a second studies that will show exactly the opposite. So after that, you need a healthcare professional to kind of sort this thing out and see if the information you found is real or not.
Yeah. I'm just curious. Last time I was at the pharmacy, actually it's your pharmacy. So Magic has two pharmacies. One's in St. Anne de Bellevue and one's in Lachine. I actually go to the one in Lachine. And last time I was there, the pharmacist who was working there was telling me that they're starting to move towards maybe the pharmacist can actually prescribe some of the medications now. Is that kind of the trend where some of things like urinary tract infections or cold sores, these kinds of things are going to start moving over to allow all of you pharmacists to do the diagnostics and the prescriptions?
Well, diagnostic probably never. But prescribing some medication, we already can do that for some conditions that do not require a diagnostic under very specific circumstances. We can prescribe some medication, but I think that what we'll see in the future is a little bit more pharmacies that will adjust the therapy and not diagnosing or introducing new drugs, but more like adjusting the dosage or changing the pharmacotherapy for a diagnostic that is already made by the doctor.
Right.
Well, Magic, that's it. It flew by.
Very fast, yeah.
All my questions have been answered.
Well, Magic Zarzycki, thank you so much for being with us and educating us. And the industry, pharmacological industry, is advancing so much, and I think it will still contribute to very much so as research continues. So thank you for being with us. Again, you have 2 pharmacies, right?
Yep.
St. Anne de Bellevue and Lachine.
In Lachine, yeah.
Very good, and we'll post that on our Life Unrehearsed Facebook page. Coming up on the second half of the show, we have Stephanie Erickson as our guest, talking about her struggles with anxiety. And here's to the news.
This is Life Unrehearsed with Matt DelVecchio and Stephanie Erickson. Brought to you by Severia Mobility Products, providing you better mobility for life. Call them at 1-800-931-5655.
Ouch, I have lost myself again. Lost myself and I am nowhere to be found. Yeah, I think that
Welcome back. You're listening to Life Unrehearsed on CJAD 800. I'm Stephanie Erickson, social worker and family caregiving expert, here with my co-host Matt DelVecchio, retirement home search and senior transition specialist. You can get more information about us on our Life Unrehearsed Facebook page. We're here to talk about all of life's challenges and joys too, right, Matt? We're here to talk about some good things as well.
Absolutely. It's got to be a little bit of joy. And this second half actually is a topic that many Canadians face. We're going to be talking about anxiety, and specifically anxiety disorders, as related to you, Stephanie, you've been struggling with this for a good part of your life. As a matter of fact, anxiety disorders are the most common mental health illness in Canada. We look at anxiety; it's very common. As a matter of fact, you hear the fight or flight is where it starts, and sometimes anxiety is good. You got a big hockey game to go to, or you're going to do a play. Sometimes that anxiety is actually good. There's proof that it makes you perform even better. Unfortunately, that's just standard anxiety. Unfortunately, if it turns into an anxiety disorder, this is where it could be absolutely debilitating, paralyzing to an extent. And I know, Stephanie, you even experienced many of these things. So I think just to tee this up, could you give us maybe a little background as to where you got to where you are today?
Well, I mean, it's always hard to put a finger on when things begin, right? I mean, we look back and there's always a combination of things, but I can think back to when I was about 5 or 6 years old, and I absolutely remember experiencing anxiety. I didn't identify it as anxiety back then, but I know that's what it was now. But even when I was about 3 years old, I pulled out all of the hair on one side of my head, which technically the diagnosis is called trichotillomania, which is the diagnosis, and it's supposed to be an impulse control disorder. Look, I'm no psychiatrist, but in my mind, that was a function of anxiety. And that was starting at 3 years old. So really, my whole life, I've been dealing with it, and it's evolved over the years and manifested differently as I grew up. But I've always had it.
It's amazing. And you have a video which we could actually see on our Life Unrehearsed Facebook page about you talking to your mom many, many, many years later about that. And it must be obviously traumatic for you, but for your mom to hear that and looking back and just to live through those experiences and put the pieces of the puzzle together in a way.
Yeah. It is hard for my mom, but at the same time, I think she's very proud of how happy I am, and I feel very well adjusted. I feel at peace. Yeah, I have anxiety. Yeah, it's still a struggle. But I think she doesn't see it in a negative way. I think, though, as any mother would, or father, I'm sure you can speak to this, there's a piece of guilt always involved. What did I do? What did I not do? How could I have made things different? And as a mom, my son has anxiety, and so that's something I think about too. Is, oh my God, how did I bring this on to him? And now this is something he's struggling with.
Yeah, you're listening to Life Unrehearsed. I'm Matt DelVecchio, and I'm here with Stephanie Erickson, who is actually our guest on this segment, talking about her struggles with anxiety and how she is coping. Would you say, I see you quite often, and I would say you have some good days, and some days you'd be saying, Matt, my anxiety today is just off the charts. And so are there certain trigger points that you would see, and perhaps it would be similar to how others would get these trigger points?
Yeah, I mean, I think I've always kind of described my anxiety on a scale of 1 to 10. And I think just waking up every day, I'm already at a 3 or a 4. Just opening my eyes in the morning, that's about where I am every day. And now I'm sort of used to it. So to me, that's like no anxiety. But the off chance that I'm under that, I'm like, oh, this is what other people are feeling. But I think that there are times, when it gets higher, when I'm at a 7, I'm at 8, I'm at a 9. We're going to get to one of the things that bumps me up to a 9 or a 10 often. We'll talk about that in the second half. But there are definitely trigger points, my kids being sick, me thinking about trying something new that I've never tried, so new situations for me, sometimes being on the air when I know people are listening, or being on TV, that kind of stuff. Traveling does it for me. What if? So a lot of what happens for me is I go to a what if. What if this goes wrong? What if this happens? What if? And then that starts the ball rolling, and then I move from a 4 to an 8 rapidly.
Right. And I think many, I guess, psychologists and psychiatrists would also ask you to go that route, do the worst case scenarios, and make you realize that, okay, what is a worst case scenario, and it really isn't that bad after all. But you got to a point where it was debilitating and paralyzing. Can you bring us back to those times where you just felt you couldn't even function?
Yeah, I mean, there's been a few periods in my life where it was there. I would say in my later 20s, mid to late 20s, it started to get pretty bad. And there was a period of time, I would say about a 1.5 year period, where it was at the level of panic attacks, where I was having to leave places, really feeling physically ill, questioning if I should go to the hospital. Was I having a heart attack? One moment that stands out in my mind is the anxiety was so bad in that moment. I was in the car, I was a passenger, and I almost just opened the door and threw myself out. And I didn't want to die. I was not suicidal, but the feeling in my body was so uncomfortable. I couldn't think of anything else to do. That was a pretty hard time. And then that's when I started taking medication. I said, okay, I can't do this anymore. Funny enough, I'm not on medication now. I think we'll talk about that again later. The second time when it really hit me was after my dad died. My anxiety went through the roof, and I almost couldn't leave my house for about 6 months. I was having a really hard time.
Yeah, probably one of those trigger points. You're listening to Life Unrehearsed. I'm Matt DelVecchio here with Stephanie Erickson on CJAD 800. We're going to open up the lines and text, so please feel free to call in and let us know if you experience anxiety and what you do to cope with it. So please call us at 514-790-0800, or you could text us at 514-800. So, you talked about, I guess it's a combination of how it affects you physically and how it affects you mentally. Both can be debilitating. How do you do that? Is one worse than the other?
Well, honestly, it's the head that causes the body, because I will tell you that if one of my kids says to me, "Mommy, I don't feel well," within a millisecond, I feel sick to my stomach. And it's my head that heard the information, and it goes so fast to my body. And then my body, I start feeling sick to my stomach, and then my hands start tingling. And then I'm like, oh my God, oh my God, oh my God. But I know that it all starts with my mind. But sometimes in certain situations, I'm not paying as much attention. So I'll start feeling things in my body first. And then I sort of stop. Now that I know myself well and I know what it feels like, I stop and say, okay, my body is telling me something. What about this situation is not comfortable for me? What's the reality? What are the facts? So I tell myself to give myself the facts, and the facts are never accurate, and then that helps me.
Yeah, and you mentioned something there too about pausing, and even breathing it's always recognized as simply breathe, take your time, take deep breaths. It's funny, when we were interviewing Sophie Gregoire Trudeau, this is exactly what she said when she had to deal with anxiety. Just take some deep breaths, and that was kind of her advice, because she has gone through some anxiety and mental health issues herself. Now, you talked about your family, Stephanie, and I know that's a concern for all parents, and there's this guilt that if your kids are feeling anxious, and in your particular case, your son is probably experiencing some anxiety, and it's difficult for him, difficult for the family. So we want to get into that,
Sure.
But we're first going to take a quick little check for the CJAD traffic.
This is Life Unrehearsed with Matt DelVecchio and Stephanie Erickson. Brought to you by Severia Mobility Products, providing you better mobility for life. Call them at 1-800-931-5655.
So ashamed, so confused. I was broken and bruised. And now I'm a warrior. Now I've got thicker skin. I'm a warrior.
You're listening to Life Unrehearsed on CJD 800. I'm Matt DelVecchio here with Stephanie Erickson, being very open and candid about her struggles with anxiety. We're opening up the lines and the text, so please call us at 514-790-0800 or text us at 514-800 and let us know if you experience an anxiety and what you are doing to cope with it. Stephanie, before we went out to traffic, we talked about how this isn't just a Stephanie Erickson issue, it's a family issue. And I know you're particularly concerned about anxiety of your son. So can you talk a little bit that I think most people need to realize is just not an individual issue, it is a family issue.
Yeah, and I mean, my son having anxiety is a second issue within the same family, right? So because my anxiety impacts my kids just because it's me, and I'm the mom, and it impacts my husband because he's the one who's there who has to, well, he doesn't have to, he chooses to, and he does a good job at it.
He's a good caregiver.
Yeah, he's good. He supports me, and he helps to step in if I'm having a difficult time and maybe take over for me with the kids. But also, in addition, my son has anxiety. And that to me has been devastating emotionally because it's so hard to see that. I mean, he's only 9. And we really started noticing it when he was probably around 4, when we kind of put it together. And it's been very difficult for us as parents to watch your child have a hard time. On the flip side, because we're so aware, he's actually doing amazingly well. And boy, do I wish I would have had that kind of support when I was younger, you know?
Well, I would imagine, and just listening to you, you could hear the guilt, and it must be a part of it when really it shouldn't be the guilt. But on the flip side of that, because of your experiences, I'm assuming this has helped you in how you deal with your son's anxiety.
It has, because of my experiences, because I know what it feels like, and I've been able to put it into words to help my husband understand, who has zero anxiety. He doesn't know what the feeling is. And when you have a child who can't express themselves in the same way as an adult can, it's hard to understand. So I've been able to help my husband understand the feeling and be very present for my son. But truthfully, Matt, it's my son who's helping me. More than anything.
Yeah. Isn't that something? Who would have thought? And that's wonderful.
Yeah.
We get a lot of questions. This is more facts about what you're giving and what you're experiencing, but you have to cope with it. All families, any individuals have to cope with their anxiety. Traditionally, the way to cope with anxiety is either through medication or through consultation, and what we would call cognitive behavior therapy, CBT, as it's known in the business. Those are two traditional ways of handling anxiety. Sometimes they don't work. And I think in your case, you've been down the path, both medication and CBT, and you've chosen to go another route.
Yeah, I never really did CBT. I've done therapy. I don't know that it would have been called CBT, but I have done therapy throughout my life. And yes, I've tried medication. But no, my modus operandi right now has nothing to do with anything traditional at all. Aside from my son, who I think is paramount in my own healing, he's taught me how to understand myself better, and he's made me push myself because I have to be better for him. But what I used was the flying trapeze, which is completely insane if you think about it. It's the most terrifying thing you can do. It's, fly through the air like you're in the circus. But that's what I've been using, and it's incredible what it's done for me.
I hear you. I've seen videos of you, and so talk to me a little bit more about that. It just must be an incredible feeling when you're literally on your own so far up, and got to deal with this now. Yeah,
I mean, it's a combination of being terrified and exhilarated at the same time. I wouldn't say I'm terrified anymore. Now I'm at a place where it's not to say I don't get nervous and I'm not scared, because I absolutely am. But it's definitely not the way it was. And I'm sure my coach, Patrick, would tell you the same thing, or my fellow flyers would tell you the same thing. But it's interesting because you have to start to believe in yourself. You have to trust that your body will know what to do even in a millisecond when you don't have time to process what you're doing mid-air. Your body has to lead the way. And I've transferred that to my life. When I'm feeling anxious, I just tell myself, my body knows what to do. My friend Lynn's going to crack up hearing that, because it's what I say when I'm on the platform sometimes, is my body knows what to do. And it's really helped me heal.
And that's great. And you've taken a non-traditional route. It works for you. And I guess the message is, okay, if you've tried the medication route or the physiotherapy route or a psychologist route, and it's not working, it's not the end of the road. You could always try non-traditional ways, and you found it through trapeze. I like hearing every week your stories of the week.
Yeah.
and it's been very good. Real quick one, naturopaths. Have we just got a text in about that and how it helped them? Have you ever tried naturopath?
No, I haven't. And actually, I'd like to use our last just 30 seconds to say about we're doing a workshop at the Flying Trapeze, an empowerment workshop. It's called Flying Free, and by the use of the trapeze, we're helping people face their fears and develop more positive self-messages to help them get through this. Sorry, I don't know anything about naturopaths, but we put the link on our Facebook page for Flying Free. If you want to check it out, we are doing an empowerment workshop there.
And that's an amazing workshop. Stephanie, thank you so much for being completely transparent and open. I think you're an inspiration, not just to your family, but to a lot of people. And you've chosen to take a very debilitating disease and working with it day by day.
Thanks, Matt.
Next week on the show, we have Mark Stolo talking about changing healthcare, and we'll also be with Zoe Quinn Phillips talking about the therapeutic benefits of animals. Animal therapy is a really big thing. So thank you very much for joining us. We're on every Sunday from 4 to 5, and let's head to the CJAD 800 newsroom.